Well, the soaring cost of living is being felt by almost all of us, but for school leavers contemplating their future, it is having a profound effect.
According to the latest Student Lifestyle and Learning Report by the University Admissions Centre, the cost of a degree and the chance of secure employment after graduation are playing a big role in what students are deciding to study. We spoke with a couple of students during the week.
Finance and money does go into consideration very heavily when selecting a degree. You know, people have to decide between whether or not they want to pursue their dreams or take, the better course, which will give them more financial stability. And looking at the debt that would accumulate as a result of selecting a particular course is considered by many of my peers and myself.
The rising cost of different things in society right now is having a big impact in what we want to do in our future. I know we have conversations about things like the cost of petrol, of groceries, and we also talk about how Australia's housing crisis is so much worse than other places and, even potential movings to other places in Australia or other countries.
That's the voices of some students there, and Kim Payno is the Chief Strategy and Engagement Officer at the University Admissions Centre. Kim, welcome to Weekend Breakfast.
Thank you so much.
Now, this survey is done every year. We just heard a bit from those students there. How much more of a factor is cost for students, have you found, this year when they decide what degrees to study after they leave school?
Yeah, it has been really interesting this year because it's the first time we've seen this come through so strongly. We've had increases in the number of students concerned about the employability of their course. That's risen by about 7%. They're also concerned about things like whether they'll have good work experience during the course. So that's also risen by a similar amount. So that really has started to trickle through in these results. We're seeing things like supporting their family, job security, housing affordability, coming to the top of the list of things that matter most to them, and that's really quite stark this year.
When we talk about university costs, there are a lot of factors here. The cost of the degree continues to go up. We've also got the potential cost of rent or relocating closer to university, the cost of transport, the cost of potentially an unpaid job placement. How are all those things factoring in?
Look, it is a really complex picture, isn't it? Because the other thing that we have found, and this has been consistent through all the surveys that we've done, is that the number one guiding factor, I suppose, when they're choosing a university course is passion for the subject matter. So that's pleasing because they're following their passions. But I think what we're starting to see is an even more pragmatic decision-making process where they're balancing that desire to pursue their passions against things like the cost of the course. Obviously, there's huge community interest and debate about the rising HECS debts. Those things are really playing into it. And when they're looking at courses, because they've got a choice of different universities potentially, because they're also thinking about those costs, they might be weighing that up. They're also weighing up things like the location of the university. So if it's closer to home, that might give them more time to spend on their part-time jobs. So again, that's feeding into their decision-making, whether they've got that opportunity to support themselves more fully while they're studying.
And as you say, job security is also something that's factoring into that decision-making. What do you think are the broader implications of that for areas and industries that don't traditionally have particularly good job security?
It is interesting, isn't it? Because you've got this intersection of a student's individual choices and their individual preferences. And as I say, interest in the subject matter is paramount in that. And you've got also a quite complex picture emerging nationally where we have skills gaps. We've got the federal government through things like the Accord looking to drive national productivity through preparing students through university and tertiary education and looking to, I guess, incentivise students to pursue those areas where we have national skills gaps and where, you know, the government feels we'll need workers of the future, and that balanced against individual preferences. It's quite a complex picture, and the extent to which you can drive individual behaviour as part of a national productivity agenda is really interesting, and I think it is part of the picture for students. They are balancing their own personal desires against the incentives that they might be getting to go into particular industries, or indeed the disincentives they might be having to go into others. So I guess as policymakers, people are thinking about how all these different factors intersect, and how we can, as a community, have the workforce that we need for the future, while also allowing people to pursue what they really desire, because in the end they're the most engaged workers and the most motivated workers, and we don't just need one type of worker anyway.
The report also showed that about 40% of young people are concerned about their mental health, which is actually a 10% drop on last year. What do you think's behind that?
Look, it is interesting, and we always were quite mindful that in the last few years we might start seeing some trends, and the mental health concerns were, not surprisingly, at their strongest during those years of COVID lockdown. So we had, you know, senior high school students spending much of their year 11 and 12 in remote learning and not having access to the social network of school. Many of them missed out on some of those really significant senior school milestones. So it wasn't surprising. It was obviously very concerning just how big those numbers were in those years. But it's pleasing in a sense that that's dropped. It's still 40% highlight mental health as a significant concern for them. So that's a big chunk of young people. So that's obviously still very concerning. But I feel as though the drop that we've seen is perhaps reflective of the more balanced lifestyle they might have now, given that we're not in a COVID lockdown situation. The other thing that came through is that, you know, many of them say that they're stressed at least half of the time. I mean, most of them say that they're stressed at least half of the time, if not more. So that's interesting as well. And I think part of that, it's not just the mental health aspect, it possibly is also tapping into those economic concerns. The community more broadly is experiencing financial stress, so they're certainly not immune to that, and they're reporting that, you know, that's the kind of thing that's impacting on them now.
Kim Payno from the University Admissions Centre, really interesting survey to discuss. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.